I lost my brother to suicide in 2004. I'm not a very vocal, screamy kind of person. I screamed, and my son started screaming because I screamed, and I just kept screaming. And I didn't know why, but in that scream, I felt like something in my spirit was moved too.
My fiance shot himself September 18th, 2006.
That my daughter committed suicide in 1996, but she had attempted suicide, in fact, earlier that year, and I don't even know if there were other attempts.
I lost my 19-year-old son, Kurt, to suicide December 4th of 2006.
I lost my ex-boyfriend of 9 years, my best friend. It was 4 years ago. He was probably one of the happiest people that I know.
I lost my son, JR, to suicide of March of '04. He was almost 16 years old.
He tested positive for HIV a few years prior to his death, and had been very depressed and made a suicide attempt about a year after he tested positive. He told our family then that he actually had tested positive for HIV and that he had already been diagnosed with AIDS. And that he just didn't want to live with it anymore. We were planning to go and visit my parents. He had taken the day off of work. I had taken a half a day. Got up that morning, got my son dressed. He was getting ready to go to daycare, and my mom called and she's crying and she said, they found your brother passed out in the shower. So I'm thinking that he's just gotten sick and that he's going to have to go back to the hospital because he'd gone to the doctor the day before. He committed suicide.
He's bipolar, and he was going through a manic phase the whole summer. And a month before he took his life, I broke off the engagement with him. So we were in and out. He still stayed here. I told him he can live here. I talked to him in the middle of the night. He was very upset and crying, which he doesn't cry. Real big guy. Didn't cry. At 8 o'clock, I was sitting at my desk, 8 o'clock in the morning. I got a phone call from Adam, and he just, out of nowhere, said Gene shot himself.
The idea of her life failing, the idea of her marriage failing, the idea of her last hope, the army, that was failing her too. Obviously, she had a very fragile sense of herself and connection to this world, and that's obvious by the fact that she did actually complete her suicide.
His experience was a couple years of depression. I believe what happened the day that he died was an impulsive reaction to a medication change. He was joking with his dad on the intercom at work, and it was a normal everyday day, and then all of a sudden he was vicious and mean and had decked a coworker and was flipping out on a customer, and it was on. And 3 hours later, he was gone.
He had attempted suicide once before, 5 years prior to that, and really kind of just played it off. He was upset about our breaking up and took some pills, and his mom caught him, and I think he just kind of played it off to her, and she left it at that. And after that, he didn't ever show any other signs of being depressed or anything until he and his then current girlfriend broke up, and he took his own life in front of her.
He had not shown any problems that we knew of. Coded clues where he was saying things like, I've got aggression and I don't know how to deal with it, things like that. But he shot himself with a handgun that we had in our home, and I miss him terribly.
My mother suffered from mental illness, and after a lot of years of suffering, she took her life. Suicide just a few days before Thanksgiving.
So I've certainly had touches in my life where suicide came and had an effect on me that I will probably have forever. So I had a colleague who I did work with for many years, a mental health professional, who, when I was out of town on a family vacation, jumped from the Mississippi River Bridge and died by suicide.
Okay, my name's Sister Kathy Morrissey, and I work at St. Charles. I've been, I feel, a support system or reaching out to that person, especially immediately after, the suicide took place.
Well, survivors certainly interpret the way people stay away from them as a way of saying there's something wrong with them, or that the cause of death has somehow erased the life of their loved one.
There's absolutely a stigma about suicide. People tend to whisper. People's reactions are very strange when you say suicide. Very different than a normal grieving reaction to someone that's lost a loved one. If you say, my son died of cancer or my son died of a car accident, you get oh, I'm so sorry. But you say, my son took his own life, and people go, oh. And I call it the deer in the headlights, because there's no compassion. It's just a complete startled, I don't know what to say reaction. And when people talk about depression and suicide, the tone of the conversation tends to get really quiet, or they put their hand up over their mouth, or they preface it by, don't tell anyone. So there's absolutely a stigma.
Experience the people not really knowing how to react to it, not knowing what to say, and so kind of just not saying anything. A lot of my friends, they didn't know how to react to me, so they were sympathetic, but they didn't know if they should bring it up or not. So I think more times than not, they chose not to say anything.
I think it has a stigma. I always wondered what people would look at me like, or what they would think of me, knowing that my spouse killed himself. Do they think I'm a horrible person? Did I cause it? Like, just someone off the cuff that doesn't know us. Like, are they immediately going to be like, wow, what the hell did you do to him? You know? But it's not like if someone died of cancer, but you can say that. So I think the non-talking about it is how it exhibits there's a stigma about it. And then also just not talking about mental health in general shows that there's a stigma around it, and suicide is really an effect of mental health, a mental health disease.
That stigma then, I think, is like an added unhealthy guilt trip that survivor has to work through and process.
There is a stigma associated with suicide. Why? I'm not sure. But I just know that I wasn't able to say the word suicide until 2 years after, in public. I wasn't able to say it until 2 years after my daughter's death, and that's after being in therapy for about 2 years. As a father, as a parent, as a man, when someone who you love and you care for is harmed in any kind of way, that association makes the man, the parent, the father feel inept, incompetent, and I couldn't bear the pain of someone thinking that you couldn't even protect your own daughter. You know, out of all the people that you would want to protect, you would want to protect your daughter. But I couldn't, I didn't.
There was a lot of talk, that we live in a small town and everybody knows everybody. And so I think there was some stigma, but people didn't say it directly to my face or anything like that. I felt like it was more talking behind my back, I guess you could say.
I went to church for counsel and spoke with a lady that pretty much was like, well, there's really not much you can do for him but pray for his spirit because he's in hell. The lady was really sweet, and she was holding my hand, and oh, you know, baby, I'm gonna pray for your brother's spirit because it's a sin to commit suicide and he's in hell right now. So I'm gonna pray for him. And she was very sweet about it, but it was like, that's not the best thing to say to me, you know, like right now. Really? And all I could think was, I can't come back here. I can't come back here. You know, and it turned me away from church for a long time. It's a lot of people in church that think that, you know, and because of that, they don't try to help it. You know, it's a sin. Suicide is a sin. So we just ignore it altogether rather than addressing that it's a problem. You know, and addressing the fact that there's mental health issues and there's depression and these people need counseling, not condemnation.
Years ago, way before what we call Vatican II, the Catholic Church would not even allow a Catholic funeral mass for someone who committed suicide. But since then, the Catholic Church has learned through psychology even that the person is not in their right mental state. And so what then they offer is, yes, you know, it's very important to reach out to the families and then to gift them really with a funeral liturgy for the person that took their life, because God wants you to have peace and joy again.
One of the challenges we have is the language that we use with suicide. So many of the terms are confusing. So many of the terms are not the same in each culture. They don't mean the same in each culture. So anytime we have a cause of death or a social issue as big as suicide, and we still can't really agree on what means what, we already have a dilemma on our hands. So we've got to find the terms that make the most sense. You see, the term committed suicide is a holdover from the days where it was illegal to take your life and sanctions were imposed. That hasn't been true for a very long time. It would probably be more accurate just to say someone died by suicide. Whereas people commit crimes, the idea is that committing suicide makes it a crime, and it's not a crime. The reality is suicide is a cause of death, just like cancer or heart attack. So we probably would be more accurate if we just said someone died by suicide. Another term is completed suicide or successful suicide. These references tend to confuse, again, the public about what our values are around the word suicide. An attempt of suicide then makes it also sound like a failure, that you attempted it but you weren't able to succeed. And there we put the two confusing words together. So it sends mixed messages. It would be more appropriate, I think, to say that someone tried to take their life or that someone died by suicide. And yet it's very hard to change culture and language when you hear it reinforced over and over every day.
I think that when people commit suicide, it's probably because they're either too lazy or too scared to just do what they need to do, and it's the easy, cowardly way out. So instead of going and fixing the things that they have going wrong in their life, they'll just end it all now and not have to worry about it anymore. I would say it's pretty unacceptable to commit suicide. I mean, it's everybody's choice. You want to off yourself, go for it. But I just think it's pretty cowardice to just leave everybody in your life hanging like that because you're too scared to go take care of your own business. I think it's actually kind of the other way, that most people kind of glorify it and think it's this awesome thing or that you'd have to be brave to do it, when I think it's just the opposite.
I guess, well, if you're religious, it probably comes from, you know, the Bible or different religions where if you commit suicide, I think it's Dante's Inferno, people who commit suicide, I guess they end up in a different part of hell. They don't get to heaven. I'm not religious, so I don't believe in that. I just feel that the stigma comes from just all the stuff you could have done, all the possibility all the stuff you could have changed, and you just give up and just don't even try. And I think that's where the stigma is. And if you don't even try, there's lots of, try again, and these people just stop trying. And I guess that's where the stigma is. And, you fall down, you get back up, and these people just fall down and just stay down.
I think because so many religions say that person now is going to hell, that of course that creates a stigma of, wow, that person's not going where the rest of us are hoping to go. And so I think because of that, not only can people not talk about the grieving process as openly or as freely, but I think if they buy into that notion, there's an extra layer of fear and grief because they think maybe that person's soul is lost. And so I think the stigma is definitely there, and I think it comes from what religions teach us.
That it's wrong because God is the giver of life as well as the taker of life. He gives it and he takes it away. To commit suicide would be to go against his will. That's what I personally believe. I do realize that the pressure that one receives or has in life that may lead them to suicide is real. And I do believe in methods to help individuals who have that type of pressure. I don't believe suicide is never the answer, that there is someone who cares about you and who loves you and who's willing to help you get through whatever the situation might be.
In those cases, they're against that wall that they can't see a better day coming, and somehow they're asking for help. Many people who attempt suicide don't intend to commit it, but it's a call for help. And sometimes they're successful, but I think many times it's a case where they're really saying, I need some help, I need somebody to get me through this phase that I'm going through, or these problems that I can't seem to take and overcome.
I think sometimes when someone is a faith believer, regardless of what faith or denomination, they could be very easily judgmental or also have misunderstandings of the whole issue of suicide.
I went to church for counsel and spoke with a lady that pretty much was like, well, there's really not much you can do for him but pray for his spirit because he's in hell.
Objectively, that could be wrong. However, the Catholic Church has grown in its understanding of suicide, and so therefore the approach is one of compassion and not judging the heart of that person. It's very important to reach out to the families and then to gift them really with a funeral liturgy for the person that took their life.
In my grieving process, 3 months in, and I was ready for it to be over. Like, okay, when am I going to be normal again? When is this going to be over? And I like to rush through things. I'm a instant gratification, immediately done. And also, I've had some people say, I'm over a year now. There's some people who think I should still be grieving, laying in bed, curled up in a ball, crying my eyes out. But when I'm not, they're like, why aren't you? When I want to go on a date, how can you date somebody again? So you hear that stuff. But then 5 months into it, they're like, you're doing okay, right? You're not going through your issues anymore, thinking that you should be over with it. So you hear both sides of this, different perspective. I can't even think of the word. The perception of people. Some people think, yep, you got to be over with it. Get back to your life. Get back to doing what you're doing. And 6 months, you're good. And then there's other people a year and a half later. Well, how can you date? How can you how are you over it? How can you even think of being with somebody else when, you know, you should still be grieving him. How could you be over him already? And I'm like, well, I'll never be over him.
Well, society plays, I guess, a devil's advocate when it comes to how they support the confusion around bereavement. On one hand, society says, look, you can take 3 days off or even 4 if it's out of town, but when you get back, we'd really like you to kind of be like you used to be, and we really don't want to have to deal with unexpected emotional responses. Oh, and by the way, we'll treat you like a time bomb that we'll be afraid to set you off. And so we'll avoid words that might bring back the memory of your loss. So if you lose a father, we'll avoid dad or daddy or mom or mommy if you lost a mother. Well, we won't ask about siblings if by any chance you've lost a sibling. Then society will also encourage you to stop grieving anytime that there is something more fun to do. You should just be able to park that grief and go out and be, quote, like you used to be. Regardless of the reality that in your life you will never be like you used to be because someone in your life isn't available for you to be with. So society gives a lot of mixed messages. On one hand it says, sure, take care of yourself as long as it doesn't take too long. And sure, grieve as long as you don't interfere with my world. And if I ask you if you're doing fine, please say yes. When someone's guilty, that's a punishable thing, and our society really does punish people when they are guilty. So when survivors say they're guilty, I pretty much think they're looking for ways to punish themselves. The reality is they probably just have regret, and if they could do it over, they'd do it different.
I was upset with his then current girlfriend. I felt like she should have known. She should have seen, recognized signs. She should have told me if he was upset about something or told someone. So I was guilty a lot of thinking that it was her fault, that she was to blame for that. And then I soon realized that it wasn't her fault. She didn't do it. Everybody has to be responsible for themselves. And no one was to blame.
I felt guilty because I didn't see it coming, because I was his mother and I didn't protect him. He was only a child in my eyes, and it's a mother's job to raise their children and protect them, and in some way I felt like I failed in that department. So yes, I feel guilty. I still do. Other people tell me, and me telling other survivors, that it's okay to feel that way, and that these emotions that you feel it's all right to feel that way, and so I think I'm coping okay with it.
Bear the pain of someone thinking that you couldn't even protect your own daughter. You know, out of all the people that you would want to protect, you would want to protect your daughter, but I couldn't. I didn't. So I know from a male point of view that weighs heavy. Just the whole idea of that someone is mentally ill and depressed, I think also in the black community is something that isn't talked about, or if it is, when it's talked about, it's in a very negative way. It's not in a supportive way, except with people whose relatives have had some type of mental illness or problems or complications. So I think it's something that we're still getting over. I think it's part of post-traumatic slave syndrome, that we've always have been made to appear strong, be able to weather things. So anytime you say that you can't handle it, it's like you're too weak.
Why question can only be answered by the person who commits suicide. You can't beat yourself up with that. You can't beat yourself up with why did they do it and what should I have done and what didn't I do. Because you could have done everything in the world and they probably still would have done it.
What I consider unhealthy guilt, only if, I could have known, only if I could have seen the signs. Maybe I could have done something more. And so I think then it can snowball in their psyche.
For me, the speaking with the Survivors of Suicide group was a tremendous, tremendous help. Just talking with others, and not only just the ladies in the group, but the members of my family and close personal friends and people that I felt like I could confide in. And then also I felt like I went to counseling for about 2 years, and I felt like that really was a great help to help me deal with the grief processes and the feelings of guilt that I had. And when you had a death by suicide, it turns up a lot of other turmoil in your life that you really maybe wouldn't have had problems with dealing with, but because you're in this intense grief process, that you do have problems dealing with other aspects of your life.
Very important to process out loud how you're feeling about a loss, whether the loss is suicide or any type of sorrow. It could be loss of job, it could be loss of friend, it could be moving away. But sometimes when you articulate, you own it more, and then you're able to clarify really how you really feel. And sometimes it's not until you share with someone else can some of those real deep feelings surface.
It's about being honest, not saying not hiding the fact in terms of what your feelings are, and then having a safe environment where that can be said and that we wouldn't be judged or criticized or ridiculed. So in turn, I try to create that environment for people where they won't be judged, criticized, or ridiculed.
Talk loud, talk often. Don't be ashamed, don't be embarrassed, because there's nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about. Your loved one had an illness and they died from an illness, just like someone with cancer did, just like someone with diabetes or whatever. It's an illness. No one should be defined by an illness that they have or the way they leave this world.
The majority of people benefit not only from talking, but talking in a safe environment with others who have had this experience, who can help kind of support them in understanding that what they're going through is normal, because it feels anything but normal. It feels like the most abnormal thing they could have. And the paradox is that opposite reactions are still normal. So one family member might be angry and another family member quite sad and despondent, and yet both are reacting normally to the grief process. And this is very difficult in a family, especially where people want to all do it the same.
Having siblings definitely made the process of losing my mother more bearable. I don't know what I would have done if I was an only child. We really relied a lot on each other, especially for the holidays, especially the holidays right after she died. I honestly don't know what I would have done if I didn't have them. So it was just so miserable. Like I don't know, because it's kind of hard to discern the pain that comes from the suicide from the pain that comes from losing someone. So I don't know that I felt more pain from the loss through suicide than I would have otherwise if she had just died from natural causes or something. For me, though, I guess there was a kind of slow grieving process that was happening all the time when my mom was losing her personality through her mental illness that, I imagine would be similar, though, to grieving if your father or mother had cancer. So I really don't know that losing someone through suicide is more painful, but I know that dealing with it makes it more difficult because you just don't get the same kind of support because of the suicide. And then it also makes it difficult because, like, I think of, like, telling my kids in the future, like, about the incident, about the fact that their grandmother committed suicide.
What I needed to begin recovering was a support system. That was really big. Like, just to start, one, I think everyone needs closure too. I know I don't have closure yet because I never saw him since he left my house. His parents, I didn't get to identify the body because we weren't married. And then his parents had him cremated, so I never saw him. I never saw him dead. And he wasn't disfigured or anything. People have told me how he looked. But I never got that closure. So I'm still working on it. I think that's something very important for pretty much anyone. The most important thing was setting up a support system. Like, around the clock, 24 hours a day, I know who I can call, because I was back here, who I can call at any point, any time during the day. They didn't mind if I was going to wake them up, if I needed to talk, if I didn't have to be alone. That's what I did. And then once I came out here, I didn't have many friends. I was out here 3 years, and I never really had a lot of friends because it was Gene and work. That was all it was. And he had some friends from IPFW that helped me out, like, to be there for me. But I had to make my own support system here. So I went out and made friends. It's just to build that support system. I think I don't know how I could have done it by myself.
I can talk to people at the Survivor Suicide Group. I can call my friend, and talk to her about it if I'm having a down moment. Honestly, I try not to talk to a lot of people. I talk to my brother. I fuss at him all the time. If I'm feeling upset, if I'm feeling depressed, this is your fault. I'm mad at you.
Well, I think everyone in society should ask themselves how often they engage in reinforcing stigma on any issue, but especially when it comes to someone who's been touched by suicide. And the reason that makes sense to me, the reason why we all ought to be asking ourselves, how do I reinforce stigma, is because anyone who's ever been a victim of stigma would quickly say, it's not something you want to experience. So I think most folks would say, we ought to do to other people what we want to have people do to us. That seems like a reasonable, very long-term golden rule that's been around a while. So if you don't want people to give you a stigma look, treat you, be a stigma buster. Go out there and say, I'm just not willing to be someone who reinforces stigma. But it's very subtle. There are times when silence alone is what reinforces stigma. Someone asks, oh, I know you were out of town recently. What happened? You say, well, I had a funeral to go to. Oh, who died? And you'd say, who died? And you say, oh, how did they die? That would have been a young person. How did they die? And you say, well, they killed themselves. And then all of a sudden, that's when the conversation goes quiet. All of a sudden, they have no more questions for you. They dismiss the witness and they decide, I don't think I can talk about that with this person. I don't know what might happen. And you suddenly begin to look like a minefield. That's when stigma is really reinforced, because you suddenly are the person that somehow has stopped the party. And I don't think folks realize that just stopping a series of questions can actually reinforce stigma.
Suicide should never be an option. The only way we can do that is by loving each other more, paying attention to each other more, and giving more of ourselves.
I would say that you don't know what I'm going through, and you don't know what I've experienced. So don't pass judgment until you know, until you felt what I have felt, until you have seen the pain and the hurt caused by somebody who commits suicide, until you have experienced that issue yourself. Until then, don't pass judgment and don't say, well, it's just another suicide, that's just another person. It's serious. It's just as serious as cancer. It's just as serious as a migraine headache that won't go away. It's as serious as anything like that. So don't judge and downplay what I felt. what my brother felt on the day that he was dying, what my mother is feeling right now, what my father is feeling. Don't judge that and downplay that as nothing, as another grief, another loss. It's a loss. It's a whole nother kind of pain. So until you, the person who has never experienced that, can say, I'm a survivor, you don't know. So you can't judge me, and don't judge my brother.
Wherever she is, I pray I could be there, you know, when I leave this place, and I could just kiss her and hug her and tell her how much I love her. I just can't wait to do that again.